Hello, everybody. My name is Paula Carnero Cox. I am responsible for marketing and business development for Wonderbots. Today, we have a very special discussion. I think it's something that's top of mind for everybody that's been in this industry, around this industry, or trying to figure out what the heck is going on with this AI craze. So today, we are joined by Bill Schwab from Druid, one of our premier partners. Hey, Bill.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome. And then we also have our head of customer success, Ahmad Olmos, with us. Hey, Ahmad.
Hey, everyone. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, we are very excited about this conversation today. As the world continues to evolve and as AI becomes both a fear and something that we absolutely need in our businesses today, it's important to debunk the hype from reality and understand where it is that we're headed with this innovative technology that, secret to all of you, has actually been around for kind of a long time. We're just figuring out how to operationalize it, and the translation to the masses has really taken shape. So the format of our webinars, we start off with a few details and information that comes from the analysts. We spend a lot of time doing the research for our clients and our prospects and our partners so that they can go back to doing their day jobs. So as we get started, we usually give you guys a little bit of insight of what everybody's talking about, what some of the competition is perhaps thinking about and doing. And then we're going to go into some questions, and we'll have these two gentlemen join me again in just a moment. So gentlemen, I'll go ahead and kick off the PowerPoint presentation, and I will invite you back in just a moment. All right, let me get my screen share started. As with all webinars as well, guys, you are welcome to chime in with questions. There is a Q&A button at the top of your screen. Feel free to use that as anything pops up, anything's enticing, anything you'd like a little bit more information about as we move forward in this discussion. All right, so I think it goes without saying that the world of AI is evolving. So not only for everybody who has downloaded ChatGPT or some version of it on their screens, but those of us who have been practitioners in intelligent automation for a long time. What we're going to be talking about today is some of the things that we've seen along the way, some of the advent of technology that's coming on the helm. And as we approach budget season, there's no better time to think through how you are going to infuse your organization with AI. Now, I always start off with a quote because it's better to hear it from them than us. And it's important to see that this is not just a tool. It is a strategic enabler, and it's something that you should be thinking about, not only in your operations, but in your hiring practices as well. Everyone who is graduating, the youth of today that's up and rising in our workforce, is really going to challenge themselves with joining an organization that's innovative, ahead of the curve, and doing things that are modern, right? You're not going to get an accountant out of college anymore that's willing to pivot table their way to a close. So as we move towards this AI innovation landscape, it's important to understand what it looks like. So let's take a peek at what we've seen to date. I think it's important to go through the history of how these technologies have emerged so we understand where we've been and where we're going, right? So some of you might know this, some of you might not, but I'm actually a history major by practice and somehow ended up in this tech space. So if you look at this from left to right, we see that advanced natural language processing was sort of the beginning of this. It was sort of the native way that we looked at things. And what that basically translates to is that a machine can actually listen, understand, and interpret what a human says. We moved on, and healthcare was one of the first places that really began to adopt this technology. It was important to see the way that we were translating and adhering to patient requirements faster. A lot of times we saw this in the back office. There's a lot of changes in healthcare in the United States, for example, over the last 10 years. And with the changes that have taken place, it was important to understand how insurance was going to pay out. What's the difference between a deductible? How much have you really spent towards what it is that you're doing? Have we coded the healthcare, coding of what kind of diagnosis we've had to the right extent, right? And are the accuracies in place so that the customer, the patient in this case, ultimately gets paid out? It's moved along the way and scientists got excited, and you'll see the dip there. I think many of you have probably heard of blockchain. That's still very much in existence, but it's been less of a hype. And the reason is that's a lot of behind the scenes. Web3, some of these more technical areas which will probably become mainstream in the next 5 years as AI has most recently. But these are things that are behind the scene. And as the chart moves along, you see that there's an adoption dip as some of the complications of these items are there. We then moved into sustainable equity and understanding kind of ethical AI. And I think that really moved the needle. We partnered with a organization that was actually on the forefront of understanding how it was that we were going to determine our carbon footprint, for example. As those use cases began to emerge and the value of seeing things for what they are became relevant, it became more important to figure out new and efficient ways to find that data. And so we moved along. Generative AI, I think we've all heard of that. So this was the beginning of us saying, okay, if there's enough use cases that at a macro level, not just back office, not just invoice processing, not just chatbot optimization, but if there's true use cases that can move the needle in how we work with the rest of the world, for example, with multinational organizations, then it's important for the machines to get smarter at making the machines smarter. So what does that mean? Before, what we did when we came up with RPA, robotic process automation, about 15 years ago, that came on the scene. And what we were having to do is create a center of excellence, a new line of business, a way for people to develop and optimize these robotic process automation processes, right? And so as that came to be, it became yet another line of business that was a cost center. So as organizations were trying to figure out, what are we going to do next in RPA? What are we going to do next in automation? Some of these terms like machine learning came on the helm. We began to see that things were trying to move forward faster, better, stronger, more accurately. Generative AI was the advent of machines helping code for the machines. If you move a little bit further along the way, we have now landed squarely in the age of agentic AI. So that's the term that everybody is using. And as we think through what that means for us, and with our partnership in Druid, we've really seen at Wonderbots that what our clients are trying to do is create business outcomes faster. It's never fast enough, right? Automation did it, to a certain extent. We got a lot of material gains in organizations, but as we move along in understanding what humans and robots essentially are going to do together, the term agentic became coined. And what that means is that, in essence, we're making the machine work with us more tangibly. Now, many vendors have claimed that this has been the case all along, right? But behind the scenes, there's a very dedicated workforce or a company like Wonderbots making RPA do what we said agentic really did. Well, today the technology has been harnessed to where we can actually take business logic, apply rules, and ensure that the agentic automation is taking those rules and applying them by themselves, autonomously. So it's autonomous AI, autonomous automation, that's now being the buzzword, the craze, what everybody's trying to figure out how it works. Naturally, when we put our lives and our operations and our businesses in the hands of machines, there's a lot of questions. And that's why we have webinars like this, informative sessions for us to figure out where we're headed and what it is that we're trying to do. Agentic AI is what you're going to hear about a lot in the intelligent automation space until Gartner coins another term. For the overall umbrella. We've seen hyperautomation, we've seen intelligent automation. I think we're circling the wagon around whether boat lasts or not. But what I can say is that we've been seeing it across the board with all of our partners and with all of our client adoption. In fact, every new to automation client that we get is asking, how do we do this faster? What do we do to ensure that the machine is going to continue to do what it's supposed to do? How do we ingest value without creating an entire organization within our organization? We don't need a new line of business anymore. And you're seeing a lot of this move towards a managed service model, which is another reason why we're so excited to partner with Druid, because they've really seen that the ingestion of these type of rules is an important place for us to be together. Why the buzz around agentic AI? Well, let's look at some of this. Again, autonomy, that's the name of the game. Being able to have automations that don't need oversight as much as they used to can decrease the total cost of ownership of this capability tremendously. It gives us a view into being able to forecast a little bit more seamlessly. There's not hiccups that come along the way as much as they're used to that could derail a program or could derail the way that we were planning on adding value for the year. So that autonomy is going to be crucial to being able to understand what the predictive nature of cost for these things are going to go. Improve problem solving. So what can the AI do? It can hold on to a lot more information than my memory. On certain days, I can't even tell you what I ate for breakfast. Today, I actually can because I made pancakes and they were awesome. But on most days, I couldn't tell you if it was granola or if it was eggs. So having an AI agent be able to understand all of those use case ideas, everything that the board asked for last year, all of which your private equity, funding had said would be the equivalent of your EBITDA score this year. What is it that your auditors said that you had to do to not get that fine? Problem solving is now soothed with machines having the memory. Adaptability. We've gotten to a point now where we can come up with new strategies. We can come up with new ways to address business challenges. It's time to rethink how machines and humans are working together, and it's more seamless than ever. It's a really exciting time. The personalization has been really exciting, and that's why I'm so happy to have Druid here as well, because as we move towards this, the example I always give is when you're on the phone with the operator and it's like, I want to speak to a human. I want to speak to a human. Why do you do that? Because the machine or the auto answer isn't giving you exactly what you need. So I don't know how many times, I've been caught screaming at the phone saying, speak to an operator, speak to an operator. And now it's been speak to an agent, right? And as we move forward towards enhancing what the agents do, we're getting to that point of personalization. It's not just about the machine being programmed to do certain things. It's about agentic AI really taking over some of those tasks that were traditionally only human. This is a scalable approach. Imagine an organization that continues to grow and continues to bloat their back office. It shouldn't be that every time you add a customer and new invoices that you need to add another accountant or another customer service representative. So this really gives you the ability to have cost avoidance and planning what your workforce of the future looks like. And lastly, the communication skills. They've enhanced tremendously. My example of speak to an operator, because I can't get through with the machines or the hitting buttons. We're not talking about that anymore. We're not talking about going through, different menus after menus, hitting 1 and then 5 and then 6 and remembering the pattern so that when you call back, because invariably you'd get hung up on, you'd have to do it all over again. We're talking about real communication skills. We're talking about true understanding. We're talking about being able to action requests of your customers faster and more accurately. So in the next 5 years, there's a tremendous amount of investment going into generative AI. And the reason generative AI is so important here as we think through what we're doing with agentic is because we want the AI to generate itself. Now, that could sound like a very scary concept if you have, Born Identity, Mission Impossible, or some of these movies, crossing your brain on how that potentially works. But what we've talked about here and what we continue to talk about with our clients is de-risking some of this technology by making sure that there's guardrails. So keep in mind that just like automation of the last 10 years, what we do with AI is ensure that it adheres to what your compliance regulations are. So this is still within the confines of your rules and what you need to do in your organization. The amount of money that's being put towards this, the amount of M&A activity that's upticked in the last 2 years gives us a real indicator of the fact that this is here to stay. This isn't just another hype cycle. This is something that we're infusing all of our business operations with. And it's important for you to know that and to understand where and how you can apply it to. The global AI market is continuing to grow. By 2027, that's only 2 years away. We're at the end of November, the middle of November. Next week's a short week in the US, right? Lots of holidays coming up. So it'll be 2025 before you know it. When we did predictions like this 2-3 years ago, before this happened, we'd say by 2025, 10 years out, 7 years out. Now we're able to predict amounts of money and investment 2 years out. It speaks volumes of how much the adoption rate has increased. When we look at understanding the development cycle, where do you start? It's really thinking through what the value system is in your organization and what business challenges you're trying to solve for. Basic AI functionality can be out of a box, very simply put, and put within the guardrails of your organization's current security measures. Not a real big uplift. We actually have options for chat with your data, being able to control the way that your employees don't leak information to the World Wide Web via ChatGPT, secure transmission of data, and still get what they want. Law firms are leveraging technology, basic AI functionality to see the contracts, the pages and pages and pages of contracts and legal discourse that they have to understand, recognize, and act on. And they're able to do that in a very basic measure. This technology is so powerful, it doesn't take the quantum physics leaps that you have to think of in the past, right, to be able to put this forward. There's basic uses of this that can be implemented as quickly as 2 to 3 weeks without a data scientist and without having an entire engineering team on board. It's important to move up the scale, though, and understand that there is security and reliability. So as you get a little bit more advanced with adoption, it's important to have the guardrails on. We advise our clients to use a provider like Wonderbots that has really good cyber security, cyber insurance as we plug into your systems, ensuring that we understand what the risks and what the vulnerabilities could potentially be with data transmission. And moving up the scale, it's important to continue understanding that as you integrate, you have to widely view acceptance and adoption in the organization. Now, some folks think maybe we need to tell everybody we're AI ready. I think it's a good call. You're going to attract far better workforce, understanding that you're modern, ahead of the times, and staying innovative and competitive. But some folks prefer to just infuse their information and infuse their operations with AI and just have the interface appear itself, to the workers and changing the operating model. Once you start implementing this from a true perspective where you're getting to optimization, you're getting to the place where the board recognizes what you're doing and really seeing the strategic impact, that's when it's really important to think through what kind of operating model you're going to have in your organization. So unlike many technologies in this category of years past, AI is something that you can actually implement with a pretty low friction point and begin to see value quickly. Where can it help? We have different areas, right? So citizen experience is really having the forefront of your organization coming to you with innovative ideas. It can boost productivity. It can improve business operations, really thinking through how is it that we read something? How do we get through a brief, because they're never very brief. And what do we do to do creative and content creation, right? And so in our marketing department, for example, we're thinking through some of the ways that we can add, enhancements to what we do and what we think. We're looking at what's performed in the past. Are there ways to optimize it or look through things? Is there a place where we can apply some sort of autopilot to answer things? And very recently, we're adding a true chat to our website so that people that come to view the website can actually see and interact and find what it is they're looking for. Now, what's important to note here is that you can really see a lot of production value maintaining. So traditional automation really lasts about 1.5 years, 2 years. By the time a renewal comes up, we see a lot of our clients trying to think through, is that still giving me value? Am I still reaping benefits from this? Is this something worth continuing to maintain? And the projections are already showing that AI is here to stay. It is valuable. It is something that's going to continue to be adopted so that we can continue to see what it is that we're going to do next. So you see that span of those processes last a little bit longer than what we've seen in traditional automation, which is exciting for organizations like Druid and Wonderbots. So what do we think you should do? Well, first step, by showing up to a webinar and educating yourself. Education is power in this space. It continues to change, it continues to evolve, and we stay up to date with it as much as we can. I have probably 15 or 20 tabs that are informing me of what's the latest and greatest on the scene with technology, because it's important for us to share that with our clients. We also encourage experimentation. Like I mentioned, there's very low risk opportunities for AI infusion in your organization that could really move the needle. Trying it out, it's a little bit different than dabbling, right? Throw something into production, see what happens. Work with your IT department seamlessly to understand where it is that this could actually give you business value. And lastly, it's time to deploy. Unlike organizations trying this stuff out in the past, I think we had terms like proof of concept, proof of value. Guess what? It works. It's about understanding how it's going to work in your organization today. So with that, I'd like to introduce you guys once again and introduce to the program here, Ahmad and Bill, if you could join me, please. Ria will get you spotlighted. And we've got a few questions that came in advance of this, and I'll flash their information at the end of this session as well, so that we can ensure you get in contact if this is something that you're interested in putting into production. So Ahmad and Bill, thank you so much. And I think some of the things that we've seen from kind of a educational perspective, kind of, the view from the pie in the sky, right? What the analysts are saying, we really need to translate to something that's more tangible and operational. So for starters, I'd like you to introduce yourself, and Bill, will start with you and give us one example of where conversational AI, something that's a little bit easier to digest, or a category of AI, has helped a business that you've seen in your time at Druid.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. And as Paula mentioned earlier, I'm Bill Schwab with Druid AI. A little bit about me: I'm a reformed banker, now technologist, and I've had the good fortune, really, of being at the forefront of the AI evolution for over 10 years now. And as Paula mentioned, this tech has actually been around for a long time, but this operationalizing it has always been the challenge. And I've just been fascinated over the last 2 years with generative and now agentic AI breakthroughs to see that coming to life and really enhancing, as Paula mentioned, the lives of our customers. And a great example, we had our Symbiosis event. Customers, partners, and future customers joined us last week, and one of our presenters was from Georgia Southern University, and they've created this fascinating student-facing persona around their mascot, Gus, and it has dramatically enhanced the student experience, particularly for incoming students who are new to the school, new to everything about college. And so I think when you ask for examples, that was the first one that popped into my head. And it's really been game changing for both that student body and also for the organization, for the university, in terms of satisfaction of their students. So thank you so much for having me today, and look forward to digging into the questions, and I'll turn it back.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Bill. Ahmad, how about you? I'm so excited he finally said yes to a webinar. This is big for me today.
Good morning. No, thanks for having me. It's a little bit earlier on my end, but it's okay. It's all good. And thanks everybody for coming and joining us. Anyways, my name is Ahmad. I'm actually head of client success here at Wonderbot. So I get the privilege of working across all verticals, across all clients, to really understand the issues and challenges that our clients are having day to day, right? In regards to my background, I've been fortunate enough to be in the AI and automation space for the last 7-8 years. Before then, I was more into traditional transformation, big CRM implementations, evaluation analytics, all the fun stuff that's kind of our bread and butter, and probably all our mutual backgrounds, right, as a whole. In regards to what I've been seeing in the field, especially as our clients are starting to touch the AI conversation, right? One of the things that we at least like to focus that conversation around is, where are you most mature, right? Because at this point, you probably have an automation COE, you probably have a couple of friends and families around the organization, right, that are true champions and sponsors for your work. And at this point, it's really about where can you capitalize and be safe to test and be safe to evaluate new technologies, right? When we talk about AI, there's really a couple of flavors that you can kind of go down, right? Or a couple of paths, better said. The first path is be as adjacent to what you know, right? So in that situation, it could be that, let's take the most mature line of business that you support, take the scope of automations that you have there, and see how you can kind of enhance the employer customer experience. For example, for one of our Fortune 500 tech clients, right? We have a huge accounts payable and accounts receivable automation, finance automation COEN program there, right? And one of their very, very first automations that they had there was, obviously reading invoices, getting contracts, getting POs, managing POs, all that fun stuff. And from their perspective, we were like, wouldn't it be nice, right, if our employees, instead of going through an email form or UI, et cetera, could just chat, right, and get this information. What that allowed us to do is, instead of all these emails back and forth, right, it was a live chat that in case the automation or solution did not have the proper information, it could just ask, right? And right then and there, instead of having that long SLA of getting the right information to get the right output back to you, you'd be able to get it right then and there, right? And again, in that situation, it was already a client that had an established automation footprint, right? That said, hey, let's start safe, but let's be bold, right? And let's try to figure out how we can best help the people that we're already helping now. And that can
No,
continue to be our sponsors, right?
yeah,
So,
no, I think
yeah,
that's a great example. And be safe, but be bold. I love that. I
yeah.
think that's a great mantra kind of going into it. So Bill, I'm going to turn this question to you because not always is there an instance of an intelligent automation practice in advance, right? So sometimes we have these examples of we're adding to and scaling using AI. In other instances, folks are like, I haven't even done that. What do I do, right? So how would you advise to organizations to assess and prioritize an AI initiative if they're brand new starting it? And what is kind of the lowest cost for entry for something like that?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. Well, really, in my mind, comes down to identifying one of two things. Really, are there some significant pain points within the organization around efficiency that rise to the level of needing attention? And of course, every organization has those pain points and those needs, but really sorting through that and identifying where to get started. And I love what you mentioned around sort of the data, painting a picture that companies really do need to embrace this technology and get started. And so finding that starting point and not overcomplicating it is critical. And so it might be one of those pain points. It may be my accounts payable, using Imad's example, is really suffering, and I'm having trouble maintaining, the rate of collections and engagement that I need, just because it's resource intensive if you're doing everything manually. Or conversely, it may be something related to engaging with your customer base. And so it could be a pain point, or it could be a revenue driver, and really assessing, where do I feel that I can put the energy into and get engaged with someone like Wonderbots and as our partner with Druid, to identify and then map out a game plan to get going, get started. You'll hear that consistently from most of us who have been doing this for a while. It's really, you got to find that use case and get going. And there's some thoughts that go into how do you choose a technology that we can get into a little bit later.
Yeah. So I think one of the other things, and Ahmad, I accidentally clicked a button, so please unmute yourself. My bad. One of the things that I was thinking through, as this question was being asked is how do we help our clients? Because I know a big part of the Wonderbots value add is us really helping them understand and identify the total cost of ownership. These are new players on the scene, right? So there's a lot of hype saying, oh, you need to hire data engineers and you need to have data scientists and you need to have this entirely new workforce, which can really add up to somebody and, kind of make that barrier for entry seem almost impossible. So what are some of the ways in thinking through what the total cost of ownership is as clients are beginning to embark on this?
Yeah, honestly, just to piggyback off of what Bill was saying, it really as you're introducing a new capability into your organization, obviously it has to do with the basis of your business case, right? One of the beautiful things about AI, specifically conversational AI, is it has three very core components to its business case, right? And for some of our clients, we're strictly using it to be able to enhance their classification capabilities, meaning the requests that are coming in, do we understand what it is? The volumes are so high, oh my God, our reps are spending a lot of time trying to get additional information. That's basically, time spent, right? The second aspect where AI could be really leveraged is the enrichment part, right? Whether it's, having some sort of interface like a chatbot, et cetera, or a virtual AI assistant to be able to interact with an end user or a customer to be able to collect information. Again, time that your people don't need to spend, right? I think that's very valuable. Or similarly, with a lot of our AML clients, right? Like we can use existing data from your systems of records to go ahead and collect this information and create kind of this one view, right? The last part that I like to focus in regards to the investments for AI is the execution part, right? So just because you're introducing a new capability doesn't mean that you don't get to reuse what you already have, right? This is where you would attach AI to your RPA or automation solutions, right? To be able to trigger and execute additional processes to gain that additional throughput, right, for your ROI, right? So to synthesize it, right? There's the whole classification part where you're able to say, okay, what is this? Let me understand this. Let me reduce the time trying to figure that out. I can also reduce the time of being able to understand the client that I have with that, or person or issue that I'm trying to figure out right now and reduce that time. Or I can trigger the investments that I've already made to be able to get additional throughput, right? So again, it's pretty well balanced, depending on your organization, depending on what solutions you already have in mind. And to be clear, these are not just automation investments, right? I mean, some of our clients have made heavy investments in Salesforce and Dynamics, et cetera, right? So it's about how do you leverage the investments period that you've made to be able to capitalize on the value of AI, right?
Yep. No, I think that's spot on. Yeah. And one of the questions that came to us in all our webinar series, we ask questions as folks register, which I think is fantastic. That helps. So I think one of the important things to think through is this question that came up, which I think segues just beautifully here, is, what are some of the best practices for integrating AI into the existing systems without incurring costs? So I think you touched on that, Ahmad, briefly, but where would you say to kind of look at it, assess, and understand sort of where to start? That one's piggybacking right back to you, Ahmad.
Oh yeah, no problem. Honestly, like my advice would stay the same. One of the things that our clients will go either one of two ways. They'll either double down on their automation program, right? Or they'll double down on their big ERP implementations or like CRM implementations, etc. One of the things that I've seen is that the CRM AI integrated components, they work, right? But the reality is that they're new and these companies do other business, right? So maybe their AI chops are not as strong. So one of the things that we've figured out is that we may need to create some sort of data facilitator or AI solution at the upstream to be able to clear up that information in order to better capitalize on the integrated and the quote unquote integrated AI out of the box components for like bigger ERP solutions. And when it comes to, hey, I want to introduce a new AI capability. The reality is, and Bill knows this, we've done this a couple of times already, it's not about a use case, right? It's about a program, right? And a use case, when we're talking about here, we're talking about a line of business, right? Where we're saying, this is where you start phase one, but how do you get to phase 3, and what are the add-on components there, right? Again, just like we were doing 7 years ago, right? Where do you start, this automation or solutioning? You start with your friends, you start with your family, you start where you have the biggest footprint, right? But make sure that you have a program that scales out. Again, just because it's AI, just because it's a new capability, doesn't mean that reusability, scalability, those enterprise factors that make it easy for maintenance and operability are not there. Like we most definitely need that. Because again, to your point, Paula, you don't want to create this big team that's here maintaining your AI, your automation, your this solution, that solution. Honestly, like at this point, that's why a lot of our clients now are really more focused on, hey, I want to identify the challenges and business problems. I need a partner to help technically solve this, right? And then I want somebody else to just manage it, right? Because at this point, all our clients on their end, they're more in charge of the demand, the scorecard, the analytics, the optics of it, right? And being able to continue the sponsorship that is being done for AI and for automation programs as a whole. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. So Bill, I'm going to ask you, a lot of what we've seen, and I think a lot of, when we're thinking through chat bots, or thinking through what we're now kind of reframing as AI agents, right? There's some malaise, as I described, when I was going through the presentation. Wonderbots coined the term digital BPO. And the reason we did that is because it was a lot easier to begin to explain contact centers, AP outsourcing, AR outsourcing to the cloud, right? You're not going to another country or a different time zone or a different region, or a different language even, right? You can truly translate the idea of, labor arbitrage to the cloud. And it's actually a better number, 1-to-1, if you really look at it. So when thinking through digital BPO as it relates to contact center, I know you guys have had a lot of work in contact center, and I think that's a really tangible place for folks to understand conversational AI. How have you seen the value there? And what is it that we're really aiming to help our clients achieve when we talk through kind of this digital BPO movement, of thinking through an extension of your team, maybe not onshore, maybe, in the cloud? What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I look at this as really the original AI or chatbot use case back in the day, right? It was always, how do we help support the human customer service agents, contact center agents, and engage with people in a way that reduces the FTE load on the organization and saves cost without necessarily pushing something to an offshore environment. And so it was the original vision, but of course we talked about operationalization. Really, the chatbots of old weren't very good, and you ended up with a much more negative experience than you would have gotten had you gone with the offshore option. And of course, now, as particularly since ChatGPT opened all of our eyes to the power of the large language model and generative AI, suddenly we have an engagement ability that mirrors, and it's closely becoming comparable, if certainly if not better than many of the offshore options. And so now we can look at this replacement option or enhancement option. We don't like to talk about replacing humans with robots, but enhancing humans with robots, and start to test it out, engage, and importantly, measure, right? You want to be working with a platform that can take the data from those conversations and really break it down and produce valuable analytics to tell you where things are going well and where things aren't going well. And AI is a very iterative process. We deploy, we test, we examine, we get feedback from users, and then we enhance it. And this is a constant evolution as we go through these customer relationships. And so, it's where that managed service model you introduced earlier in the conversation with Wonderbots, helping maintain that iteration and evolution is so powerful, because really, when we look at the data now, the results of these digital BPOs exceed most of the metrics we see in the offshore, and it's it's empirical evidence that this is the right approach for these organizations, and it's super exciting to see. It's just the next step in all of our AI journey.
Yeah, no, and I think we did kind of a disservice to ourselves for a long time, measuring things like average call handling time instead of outcome received,
Yes.
right? Yeah. So it's much like in lead gen and marketing. My boss doesn't care how many emails we send out, how many calls are made, how much activity is done. It's about the outcome. How many clients did you close? How many meetings did you have, right? The tangible outcomes. And I think for a long time, when measuring the effectiveness of a new operational change or an efficiency gain, we were looking at activity rather than outcomes. And for the first time, I think we're finally measuring the right thing to make sure that we're really being effective, as we think through what makes sense to spend more. With that, one of the other things that I wanted to pop back at you, Bill, is somebody asked, what are the primary benefits and risks of adopting agentic AI? So I'm sure in several, conversations, introductory calls, the question comes up, but I'm scared, right? Or how do we deploy AI What is the change management motion in our organization? What are we supposed to say to all of our employees? How do I tell the board that we're not going to have some cyber attack and we've got sufficient penetration testing underway? So how do you assuage some of the fear that naturally comes with a new technology adoption in this category?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question. I could go down a rabbit hole of what are the risks of not adopting agentic AI and AI in general, but we'll stick to the topic
we
here.
Can we can sum that one up very quickly. The risk is that your organization might not exist anymore.
Exactly.
I think it's that simple.
No question, right?
Yeah.
The data shows that.
So tell us a little bit about the natural human nature fear of trying something new.
Yeah, I think it often it really depends on what part of the organization you're talking to. If you're talking to the customer success side of the organization, the fear is that the experience won't be the same and you'll lose the human touch.
Right.
If you're talking to the IT department, the fear is there could be a security risk or exposure or a load on that organization to try to help get the data that's necessary to support this. And, going back to the earlier question, the reason all of the experience has gotten so much better is partially the generative AI and the communication, but it's also the ability to access all this data. And so that creates some fear in the IT organization. I was in a meeting the other day, and it was a business unit pushing through this initiative, and the IT director was sitting there saying, yes, but I need to know how much work this is going to be. And clearly ready to try to stop everything because he knew his organization was bandwidth constrained and he was concerned. And of course, we have ways to manage through that and help lighten the load on those organizations. And as you can imagine, all of these fears ultimately are unfounded in many ways. And so we can now replicate and deliver customer experiences that are on par with what you would get with a human, and in many cases even better, because you're only as good as the agent you're talking to in a human conversation, whereas the AI will get it right every time, will be very consistent. So it's there are steps in overcoming these fears, but they generally fall into the big buckets of security concerns, workload impact on sort of back office folks that need to support the initiative, and then on the user experience. It might even be the employee experience if it's an internally facing virtual agent. So I'd say those are the big buckets that I'm seeing in these conversations.
Yeah, and I think we mitigate that risk, and we always offer trials, right? And putting things into production environments so that they can truly assess what it feels like to see, taste, touch, and have this operationalized in their organization. So we're certainly willing to help overcome that obstacle together, because again, you pivot or perish. It's like we've been saying it all along. If you don't do it, somebody's going to eat your lunch, or an organization is going to get founded on the basis of an AI ready organization. Can't tell you how many different .ai companies come knocking on our door every day saying, you want to partner? You want to partner? And we're like, I don't know what you do. So the advent of these organizations being AI first means that traditional organizations are going to be dinosaurs if they don't get on board. And that's just the reality of the way that this technology works. I have one more question that was previously given to us, so we'll go ahead and start with that one. If you have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A section, and we will certainly address those before our time is up. So this question, I think I'd like both of you to answer this, and we'll start with Ahmad, because I think it's important to understand that organizations might be thinking, oh, I don't know if I'm AI ready, right? We hear that is like, what is the AI readiness motion, right? And a lot of times we hear about, okay, are you in the cloud, right? Or is your data structured? Those are kind of two of the prerequisites that I hear clients often ask, right? Is I don't know, we're not in the cloud, and our data is a mess,
Yeah.
Can that type of organization still get started with AI? And if so, how?
Yeah. So honestly, so as we all know, making sure that your data is in good order for any solution, right? AI, non-AI, like that's just the requirement, right? So, I mean, if you're starting to get ready and you believe your data is a mess, we got to figure out how to fix that, right? For one organization, quite literally, We were doing automations based out of their CRM implementation. One of the things that we said is like, oh my God, yeah, we can automate X, Y, and Z, right? No problem, done, right? But the data was so bad coming in that we had to figure out like, hey, the throughput is just not there. Right. So that's when we said, okay, what if we look at an upstream solution that is able to ingest the intake information and be able to say, okay, based on what we know, the requirements of these kinds of requests, can we classify it? And if we can't, what's the closest classification we can get to, or what additional information that we need? What that did was we were able to intervene right at the very beginning, be able to clean up the data, be able to reduce the SLA of an incoming request from a customer, right? And then be able to get to the request type so we can hand it over to the automation to execute what it was always meant to do, right? Before then, the denominator was all off. We didn't understand what was coming in. Then we were constantly reporting, this is out of scope, that was out of scope. And no, nobody wants to hear that. Everybody wants to hear, what was the issue? What was coming in? Did we understand it? And where do we give it off to? Right.
Yep.
So I share that story because even if you believe your data is not in the right position, right, there are ways to overcome that, and there might even be an AI solution to actually fix that part, right? So that's something that's very, very doable, right? And again, as something along the lines of the mantra of be safe but bold, right? Take a look at where the majority of your technology investments are, because where you probably spent most of your money is probably where you're most ready to be able to integrate AI there. All right. Makes sense?
And I think, yeah, absolutely. Well, it makes sense to me. Hopefully it makes sense to everybody there.
Yeah.
I was going to say too, is one of the other things that we did at Wonderbots as a result of this frequent request of, oh my God, my data is a mess. So we did a data lake 5 years ago, or we did this, and it's like password protected from, like the Wizard of Oz. We created a very easy ETL essentials. And your first step to becoming AI ready could be as simple as deploying what we call report bots into your systems. And what does it do? It fetches data and it structures it. So as your first automation as a baseline, if this is a to-do that you haven't done, in the last 10 years of your business planning, then it's time to get your data structured. And we have a mechanism that makes that very easy for you. Very seamless. ETL essentials are reporting. So if you're thinking through, oh my God, I can't do this, my data's a hot mess, have no fear, because we have ETL essentials for you guys to kind of leverage and seamlessly work into the data flow of what we do with Druid. So Bill, I'm going to ask you the same question. When folks are saying, my God, my data's scattered, we have a solution for that. What about this cloud first mindset, right? I think people get very, kind of trip on themselves thinking through, deploying something to the cloud. We haven't gone to the cloud. We're not in the cloud. How do you overcome some of those questions that come from the clients and prospects thinking this through?
Yeah, and I guess my first comment is, Imad, I've never heard of an organization with messy CRM data. I don't know what you're talking about. No, it seems to be every organization. I'll get to the cloud question in a second. I also wanted to weigh in on this concept of messy data. And one of the things we hear consistently from clients who have launched into an AI initiative is, we didn't actually realize how messy our data was, and introducing an agent that was accessing it and producing results sort of shined a spotlight on where our problems were and allowed us to address and fix them in a way that was impossible without the AI. So oftentimes it's, you think about the chicken and the egg, it actually makes some sense to dive in and get started, because it will help you clean things up as the initiative progresses. And so that's been a really interesting outcome for some of our clients. This cloud first, I mean, it does feel like most organizations are moving to the cloud. We still see in our government clients, of course, they'll never, Department of Defense isn't going to the cloud, and a lot of the hospitals probably won't as well, given the HIPAA concerns and the cost of that. The good news is with Druid's platform, we can deploy the same capabilities in an on-premise environment as we do in a cloud environment, of course, with Wonderbots as our delivery partner. So that idea that we've got to move to the cloud, or we've got to finish our cloud migration before we even think about AI, is something that you might want to reconsider and really think, okay, how do I do this in the way that's going to drive the most value in the quickest way? If we can deploy some agents into your on-prem environment to juice efficiency quickly, and then maybe you take a step back and look at, what does this cloud migration mean? How do we go about it? We might change our strategy a little bit. So I think it's important to not look at it as cloud first, then AI necessarily, because you have options, and the platform can do the same things in an on-premise environment that it can do in the cloud. If you're on the cloud journey, then we would sort of dig in, and this is where your partnership with Wonderbots comes in, and assess, as you go through that journey, where can we plug in the AI quickly and efficiently to maximize the value you get in each step of your transition. So that's where I'd say we should be thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the main message that that I think we've all kind of circled around in answering all of these questions is that you got to just start, right? and to not have so much fatigue, so much concern, so much fear that you're paralyzed in not innovating. Because I think the biggest barrier to value, or the future existence of the organization, is being on board with what tools and technology we have today, because otherwise your competitors are going to eat your lunch. And I think we've seen that across the board. I'm going to ask my panelists here, if you don't mind, giving us one piece of advice, one takeaway that you would offer to anybody thinking through their AI automation journey as we wrap up. That last little nugget for them to consider as they go away back to their regularly scheduled Tuesday. Bill, I'll start with you.
I'm going to say embrace the change, and I'll say it again, get started. This technology is here. It's capable. It will deliver the value that was promised so many years ago, and ultimately the chatbots didn't live up to. And I'm just excited to really be living in this world of the science fiction movies of my childhood, and watch this come to life. It's exciting, terrifying, and of course inspiring at all the same time. So
awesome. What about you, Ahmad?
No, I absolutely second that. Like, get going. There's so many ways to establish a program, create the business case, and understand how this could be valuable as a competitive edge for your business, right? So believe me, the hardest step is the first step. So if you need help kind of figuring out what that would look like, more than happy to help. But there's most definitely value for all your customers and internal employees to be able to make this successful.
Totally agree. And I will just add, since they kind of said exactly what I've been thinking the whole time, that if you've seen it in the movies, it's because somebody thought it up. And if somebody thought it up, it probably exists. So if you thought Jarvis was cool, if you're a Marvel nerd, the equivalent of a Jarvis is here. You can speak to your data. You can speak to a machine that can help you do your job better than you did it yesterday. So I encourage everybody to reach out to us, find out what it is that you need to do to get started. You don't have to have clean data yet. You don't have to be on the cloud, and you can still be part of this AI revolution. So thanks so much once again to Druid for the impeccable partnership to date. We're so excited to do so much more with you. Ahmad, for always bringing the information about how our clients are leveraging this technology, and for all the people that go into helping set up these webinars, including Miss Ria, who manages me beautifully. Otherwise, this would never get done. So thank you all for joining. We will see you again next month, and we will reach out with the recording for those who were unable to make it. Thanks so much, everyone.
Perfect. Have a good one, guys.
Paul.
Have a good one. Thanks, Paul.
Take care.